the product out of which comes much evil ultimately. So we'll talk about the demise of the gold standard in a little more detail in a minute. But my point is this. By the time John F. Kennedy comes along, the standard for value has been abolished for 30 years. And so John F. Kennedy says, we need to go back to honest money in the United States. We need to go back to an honest system of exchange and an honest system of value for our currency, because the gold standard has been abolished because that's been made illegal. And because that has been, the abolishment of gold has been so protected, in other words, you would have never been able to reinstate the gold standard. John F. Kennedy had a great idea, and by the way, it was a great idea. He said, you know what, we'll just come up with a new standard. We'll pick a different precious metal, silver. We will go on to a silver standard of value, and that's what John F. Kennedy does. And he signs an executive order, little known, June the 4th, 1963. John F. Kennedy makes an attempt to strip the Federal Reserve Bank of its power to loan money to the government at interest. And on that day, he signed, I want you to look this up. He signed Executive Order number 11110, 1110. And what that executive order did was it returned to the U.S. government the power to print and issue currency without going through the Federal Reserve. It's Executive Order number 11110, 4 ones and a 0. Just Google it. Executive Order number 11110, Kennedy, Google that, and the whole thing will come up. That was a direct attack and a direct assault on the Federal Reserve. Because what he was in essence saying to them is, I can't beat you, so I'm going to go around you. And if we establish a new standard for our currency, we won't need you. Gold is gone. I know that, right? But we'll establish a new standard, and based on a silver standard, we will then begin to print our own currency. 5 months later, John F. Kennedy is assassinated. John F. Kennedy is assassinated by a man named Oswald, who is then, Lee Harvey Oswald, who is then within days assassinated by another man named Jack Ruby. And to this day, no one with any authority can tell you where they came from. There are many conspiracy theories, as you well know, surrounding the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and almost none of them are relative to the truth. Well, it was the mob. Well, that's a big one. Well, it was the mob. And by the way, Joseph Kennedy was well tied into, he was well tied into the mob. So it was plausible. Another one was that the federal government assassinated him. Another one, but at the end of the day, nobody really knows where Oswald and Ruby came from. And then there's all sorts of, sideline theories. Was it 1 bullet? Was it 2 bullets? Was it 2 gunmen? Blah, 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 blah. By the way, the forensic evidence makes it almost undeniable that there were 2 shooters and 2 bullets. And we can go into that after class. But, now by the way, you know this to be true. Generally, when there's a conspiracy in history, although we might not be able to unravel it in that day or era, generally speaking, when enough time passes, it comes out. When, through the passage of time, the individuals or entities that are involved, when they're gone, in other words, when enough time has passed such that the truth doesn't affect anyone anymore, then usually the secret's out. Because what's the point of keeping it a secret any longer? However, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and the assassination of John F. Kennedy remains a mystery to this day. Why? Because the powers that be are still in force. That's why that conspiracy to this day remains buried. Now, let me say at this point, okay? this is a conspiracy that is well buried. Do we have specific evidence that directly links John Wilkes Booth and Oswald and Ruby to central banking? No. Let me just tell you that. That's why they've never been able to prove it. And by the way, I don't think that that information will ever come forth. So can I stand here and tell you dogmatically and then therefore show you, back it up, that those men are linked? Honestly, no, I can't. However, it is my firm belief, and I believe that if you yourself will begin to dig through it, all these other theories really run short. They fall short. You run out of substantiation really quick. Change your focus from the men who were killed themselves. Forget about Lincoln himself and Kennedy himself, and begin to track down Booth and Ruby. And you will find many indirect ties to central banking in Europe. And I believe that both of those presidents were assassinated by the central banking cartel out of the United States because they were about to put central banking out of business. If those men had been successful, central banking would have lost its control in this country. So I find it very interesting that the only two presidents to ever directly stand against the Federal Reserve are dead, and indirectly they're assassins in every case. And by the way, again, going all the way back to Andrew Jackson, have business ties with central banking in Europe. Interesting. Coincidence? Well, I don't know. All right. So now let's move on. Let's keep on. Oh, and by the way, Executive Order 11110 is still a law. Is it? Brian, is that true? Yes. Executive Order 1111 was never taken off the books. It is still a law today. Would it be legal for any sitting U.S. president, even today, to begin to print currency based on a silver standard? Legal? Yes. Has any other president since Kennedy dared touch it? No. Yes. 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 No. Okay, great question. Great question. Her question was, obviously the people involved, whoever they may be, are covering their tracks quickly because the assassins themselves are knocked off as quick as possible before they have the opportunity to talk to anybody. What about Jackson's assassin or attempted assassin? You know what they did with him? He was not assassinated. He was arrested, gave testimony that they said was, and by the way, in his testimony, he starts telling them of who are you working for, who hired him, the ties begin to come out, and nobody wanted to believe him. And the authorities of the day said, we don't know what he's talking about, he must be nuts. He was discredited and put in an insane asylum. And so that guy, Jackson's, the one, sorry to say Jackson's assassin. Jackson wasn't killed. But his attempted assassin is not killed himself, but his testimony is discredited, and it is told that he's crazy, lunatic, and he was out of his mind when he tried to kill the president, and that was the reason. And so very little is known about him past that point. Great question. Yes? Of course not. However, we know from our current administration that it doesn't have to be constitutional, right? I mean, our current president is signing executive orders like there was no tomorrow. But to your point, I have talked about what these men have done, but realize they're not alone. Okay? Realize the powers within our own government, Senate and House of Representatives. There are good guys and bad guys on both sides. There are lobbyists and money powers on both sides. And ultimately, you follow the money trail. And the central banking powers out of Europe are pulling a lot of strings along the way. Very interesting. By the way, this is very interesting. Bill Clinton, and those of you who watched Money Men, you heard this or saw this, but by the way, independently, apart from that, you can verify Bill Clinton said this on camera. We actually have the soundbite. Bill Clinton, when he was president, actually said, he said it. You will, and I'm not quoting, but this is very close. He said, once you reach the office of presidency in the United States, it is then and only then that you realize it is a virtual office controlled by virtual powers. In other words, what he was saying in sort of modern speak is that the U.S. president becomes an avatar for the true power. And he actually said that. His words were virtual president. Once you become president of the United States, you realize the office is a virtual one. And I found that very interesting that he actually said that. Yes, sir?
And I think it's interesting that in 1881, this might be just a guess, 1881, when James Garfield became he was dedicated to restoring the French sovereignty.
Right. That's right. That's right. And by the way, let me clarify a point. I don't mean to, in fact, I may have even said this earlier as I'm trying to listen to myself. I don't mean to say that these two presidents, Kennedy and Lincoln, are the only two that assassination has been attempted or that they're the only two that have ever been killed. There are other presidents. However, in most other cases, the circumstances surrounding their death is random and seemingly independent. When you began to study these three men, Jackson, Lincoln, and Kennedy, the events surrounding their assassination have so many things in common, it's not even funny. And when you follow the trail, it pretty much leads to one place. But back to your point, how does one man, the president, have the power to do this? Because he's not alone. Because he's the avatar, not because he's sovereign in his own power.
It was never challenged that it was unconstitutional for them to give away our sovereignty?
No, it was never challenged. Okay, all right, but that shouldn't be hard for us to believe. Did you know the federal income tax that you pay is illegal? Did you know that? Did you guys know that? Did you know you pay federal income tax because you're made to, and the government can make your life miserable if you don't? Now, here's your homework for next week. I want you to go find the law that says you have to pay it. It's not there. I want you to go find the law. Find me the House bill number, the Senate bill number, the law that was never ratified. There is no such law. It's about control. And yet, everyone assumes that it's federal law because we're all on board. We all drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak. Okay, now I don't want to get too far down that rabbit trail. Let's keep going. All right, let's keep going. Let's see, how much time do we got? We got a little bit of time. Let's go. Let's fly like the wind. All right, stay with me now. Stay with me now. Because now things really start to get good. Now, D, let's move on your outline. So the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve Act is well established. Central banking is well established in the United States. The only presidents that have ever tried to stop it have been killed or they tried to kill them. The gold standard is abolished in 1933. But now get this, okay? Because ultimately the global control is expanded. Now, central banking already had power, and by the way, the banking system, again, it's ancient. Even the corruption in the banking system is ancient. The United States didn't cause it or start it. We were infiltrated by it, all right? So, but what happens is, after World War II, these powers in Europe, there's a bump in the road. And the bump in the road is this. The currencies that they that they typically manipulate are now in disarray or damaged, because after World War II, so many of the European countries and Asian countries, because the war was fought on their soil, right? Europe, Japan, we could go on, right? Because of that, their economies are in disarray and their currencies are weak. And so, the United States emerges from World War II with the only currency, with the only economy that is still strong. Because even though we were involved in the war was not fought on our soil. And as a matter of fact, the war served as a great engine to keep our factories humming and to keep our people employed. In fact, for those of you that have parents or grandparents alive during the 40s and during World War II, they will tell you the work ethic that was involved it was all hands to the pump. Families sacrificed in many ways because labor and resources were all piled into the industry of making the necessities of war and the bare necessities to keep our country going. And those plants, it was all they could do to keep up with the war effort. So, after the war is over, you have all these plants that are in full swing. The vast majority of America is working, and our currency was therefore solid. Okay? Now, by the way, the gold standard's been abolished in 1933, or at least most of it. It was not abolished in its entirety. Yes?
Question.
Yes?
How is maritime law associated with what you're talking about? Is it connected at all, maritime law, when it comes to trading of the sea? Because you said it goes back for thousands of years, and you look at the Egyptian and Roman empires, how they traded, and how the currency system was established back then. Is it the same system, essentially?
Okay. In a manner of speaking, yes. Your question was, and I'm going to repeat it for the sake of the crowd, but tell me if I got it wrong. I don't want to put words in your mouth. But your question was, in essence, is, how is maritime law tied to this? More simply put, how is the common trade between nations tied to this?